Lean in and do not breathe too loud. This was never meant for your ears, a secret carried through the ribs of the mountains like a hunted thing, a single photograph found in a sagging drawer, a man in a plain coat gripping the hand of a girl with a stiffness that feels like a warning. At first glance, it is nothing. Then your stomach turns. The grip is too proud, too sure. Not a guardian, but a claimant. Not protection, but possession. This is the door, and I am holding it open for you. Step through and keep your eyes forward. What you are about to hear is not entertainment. It is a map of rot, a lineage that folded back on itself until names blurred and faces repeated, a valley where silence ruled harder than any sheriff, where blood was treated like scripture, even as it soured in the veins, where a man born from cousins chose a bride who was not a woman, but a child, and not a stranger, but his own niece. They called him Elijah in some corners, Eli in others, Junior when the past got too tangled to trace. His life was a loop, not a line, no courthouse ink to anchor it, only a family Bible stained with smoke and sweat, words written by hands that refused the outside world, hands that built fences of secrecy and called them tradition. In that world, the roads ended early and the rules ended sooner. The hills closed like a jaw and swallowed consequence whole. You think monsters announce themselves. They do not. They grow in the quiet. They learn to mimic the ordinary. They wear the faces you pass in town without a second thought. They learn that if no one speaks, anything is permitted. In that hush, Elijah learned the one lesson that destroys a people, that family is destiny, even when destiny is a cage, that loyalty means obedience, even when obedience is a crime against the soul. So listen carefully, because this is not a ghost story. It is a blueprint for how corruption nests inside poverty and isolation. How shame becomes ritual, how a community can convince itself that looking away is mercy, when it is surrender. You will meet the child who was told to smile for a wedding she could not refuse. You will feel the cold of a house where windows were boarded and voices were dimmed. You will learn how a name can be sharpened into a knife and pressed against the future. If you keep going with me, you do not come back the same. Once a man sees what was hidden in these hollers, he cannot unsee it. The photograph was only the knock. Now the door is open. Step in and keep walking. The valley where Elijah was born was already heavy with shadows. The people clung to the soil with calloused hands, and their bloodlines clung even closer. Cousins marrying cousins, nephews bound to aunts. The family tree no longer stretching outward but curling in on itself like roots strangling one another. In those hills, silence was law, and silence was survival. Elijah's mother was said to be both his parent and his cousin. His father perhaps an uncle, perhaps a brother to the same line. No record was kept, no preacher wrote the truth in ink. Only whispers moved through the night air, and those whispers were smothered by shotguns propped against porches, by eyes that dared no one to ask. As a boy, Elijah rarely spoke, his head often tilted, his smile crooked, his mind wandering to places no one else could see. Neighbors said he stared too long at the fire, that he laughed at nothing, that he walked into the woods alone for hours and came back muttering. Some called him touched. Others said he was marked by God, cursed or chosen. None could decide, so they said nothing at all. By 12, he already carried the look of a man, tall but bent, his eyes too deep for his age. He was seen in the company of older cousins, girls who should have been his playmates, yet were something more in the darkened corners of cabins and barns. The line between kin and lover blurred so easily in those hills, and Elijah crossed it as naturally as breathing. The sickness of blood was already inside him, but it was not only in his veins, it was in the silence of the valley. in the acceptance of a code that kept the family together at any cost. And it was this silence that would shape Elijah into something monstrous, a man who would one day stand beneath a walnut tree and claim his own niece as his bride, as if it were not horror but destiny. Elijah's youth slipped away quickly, not in the way most boys become men, but in a way carved by silence and the unspoken rules that allowed shadows to spread. By 14, he had fathered a child with his second cousin, a girl barely older than himself. Her name whispered once, then lost, swallowed by the same silence that held the valley. By 17, there were more children, 2, perhaps 3. One mother disappeared into the woods, another wasted away after childbirth, her grave marked only by a pile of stones. No preacher called, no hymns sung, no questions asked, because in the valley questions were dangerous, and Elijah was absorbed back into the rhythm that beat to the sound of blood folding in on itself. In the winter of 1915, a child was born who would change Elijah's course, Claraara Dillard, daughter of his half-sister, his niece by blood, though in the valley blood meant little except that it bound. Her mother died soon after birthing her. Fever, they said, though whispers told darker truths. Claraara was raised in Elijah's home, an infant wrapped in worn blankets, her cries muffled by walls that were already too close. Elijah, nearing 20, unmarried, whispered about for his crooked smile and temper, raised the girl under his roof, teaching her to gather wood, to clean the hearth, to listen to the night. She called him Uncle Eli, but the word did not stay innocent for long. His gaze lingered too long, heavy, possessive, like ownership waiting for its moment. By 12, she was pulled from the faint traces of school, from church, from eyes that might have noticed the shift. She became his world, his possession. And Elijah declared to the family that she would be his wife, and the valley did what it always did. It looked away. The day of the wedding sagged heavy beneath the walnut tree. No joy, no hymns, no preacher. Only Elijah's uncle muttering about family, about God watching. Claraara wore a dress stitched from scraps, too big for her frame, her hair tied with her dead mother's ribbon. Elijah slipped a ring on her finger, a ring from his own mother, whose bloodline was already twisted. The circle pulled tighter. She was 12, her hands small, her face pale, Elijah proud, too proud, smiling like a man who had won a prize. One cousin spoke against it. Harmon, the war veteran. He said it was wrong, that she was a child, that it was sin. Weeks later, his chicken coop burned to the ground. No one spoke again. Claraara became a ghost from that day, seen rarely beyond the sagging walls of Elijah's cabin. When she did, her steps small, her eyes hollow, her shoulders bent. Elijah sat on his porch with a shotgun across his knees, daring anyone to question him. Silence spread wider than the woods themselves. By 14, she carried her first child, born broken, its body twisted, its life cut short within weeks. Elijah buried it behind the house, a stone carved with the letter E. Neighbors whispered but did nothing. No law came. No preacher prayed, and Elijah called it purity, convinced that his blood was chosen, even as it turned to rot before his eyes. Claraara's girlhood ended beneath that walnut tree, but her suffering stretched for decades. She bore child after child, many broken, some silent, others twisted in body or mind. No doctor, no record. No outsider ever crossed the valley to help. Elijah called it God's will. He said their blood was sacred, that outsiders were evil, that loyalty was survival, and Claraara became nothing but a vessel. By 16, she had lost one baby, another pale and sickly. Elijah called it proof of strength. Claraara shrank into silence, her eyes dim, her laughter gone, her body bent beneath pregnancies too frequent, too cruel. Neighbors caught glimpses when she came to town, thin and pale. But Elijah's hand gripped her arm, his smile too wide, and no one dared to press. By the 1930s, 3 children lived, none whole. One daughter screamed at shadows, another stared into nothing. The boy, Eli Jr., silent but cruel, tearing wings from birds, burying dead animals in neat rows, signs of a sickness carried not just in blood but in spirit. Still Elijah called it purity. Still he told them outsiders were devils. Still the silence held. Claraara, not yet 30, looked twice her age, her body ruined, her spirit broken. She stopped speaking. She stopped resisting. She became a shadow in her own story. And the valley turned its face away until tragedy claimed one of her children. And even then no one spoke aloud what they knew. In the summer of 1941, Claraara's daughter, Maybel, vanished. She was only 8, small and fragile, wandering the woods as she often did, chasing shapes no one else could see. She never returned. Claraara searched until her feet bled. Elijah sat smoking, saying the woods would give her back. But the woods never did. Neighbors asked quietly. Elijah said she had run. He said the weak were better gone. He said God had taken her, no grave was dug, no stone laid. Claraara starved herself. Her hair fell in clumps, her eyes wide with madness, but silence smothered even grief. Suspicion lingered, but courage never came. Elijah grew more erratic, more paranoid. He boarded windows, wired paths, trained Eli Jr. to keep watch. Claraara chained by fear, never leaving the yard. The children growing stranger, crueler, more broken. She tried once to flee with the youngest. Elijah dragged her back, beat her until she could not stand, warning that next time she would join Maybel in the dirt. The valley heard the screams, but the valley stayed quiet. By the mid-1940s, Elijah was no longer a man, but a legend of fear. Children whispered his name. Adults lowered their voices. They said he was cursed. They said he had sold his soul, but no one brought law. No one carried truth beyond the trees, and so the silence stood stronger than any jail, and Elijah's madness deepened still. By the 1950s, Elijah bent with age, his mind frayed, yet his grip unbroken. Claraara, a wraith of herself, voice gone, eyes hollow, carrying a lifetime of births and losses, her life measured not in years but in suffering, her story already buried before her body followed. The children grew but not whole. Eli Jr., hard and cruel, the eldest daughter fragile and muttering strange songs. None knew school, none knew laughter, only the walls of the cabin, only the law of Elijah. The sickness became destiny. Blood and silence twined so tightly they were no longer separate. When Elijah died, some said heart, others whispered poison. Claraara did not weep. She stood at his shallow grave beneath the walnut tree, her face empty, her body still, the children silent, no preacher, no hymns, only the valley turning away again, because to face Elijah was to face their own silence, and silence was the one thing they could never betray. But death did not end his shadow. Eli Jr. grew into the same cruelty. Neighbors heard screams in the night, saw eyes in the trees, the Dillards walking like ghosts, their bloodline bent but unbroken, each generation carrying silence like a curse, silence more dangerous than blood itself, and the question remains, was Elijah merely a man twisted by isolation, or was he the vessel of something older, a curse fed by silence and shame, passed not only by blood, but by the refusal to speak? If silence can breed monsters, then perhaps silence is the darkest bloodline of all, hidden still in forgotten hollers, breeding, waiting, watching.